This is Queers and Crips Passing to Survive by Colby Bott and Lindsay O'Connell. Content warning contains clips and discussion of rape, violence, ableism, homophobia, and transphobia.
In film, there is a presence or acknowledgement of the ideology that people with disabilities exist in a state of otherness, on a lower social tier than the able-bodied. Though many films critique or aim to combat this flawed perception, few look into its origins and the detrimental effects it creates for disabled people on a functional and psychosocial level. In order to survive despite these damaging social impositions, many people with disabilities attempt to pass as able-bodied, concealing their identities in exchange for safety.
In the dystopian world of Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, artificially created replicants, coded as disabled, are viewed as second-class citizens despite being physically superior and looking identical to humans. Engineers created the replicants with a limited lifespan and an incapacity to experience a full range of emotion, forcing them into an enslaved class on the off-planet colonies. Because the replicants pass as human in appearance, Blade Runners created the Voight-Kampff test to analyze the distinction and identify replicants. If found, it is the Blade Runner's job to execute the replicant. After escaping their enslavement, Leon, Zora, Roy, and Pris try to take on human traits in order to stay alive. It is in this attempt to become more human that the idea of passing comes to the forefront.
Tyrell Corporation has even gone so far as to implant false memories into replicant Rachel in order to make her appear more human, so that she herself does not know what she is. Tyrell's ultimate goal is to create replicants who are undetectable to the Voight-Kampff test, therefore being indistinguishable from humans. It becomes a lot easier for people to ignore the cruel realities of inequality when they can pretend they aren't mistreating those different from them. Tyrell's control over how the replicants pass as humans raises the idea that passing isn't really for the benefit of the minorities, it's for the masses to feel more comfortable.
Roy and his companions are not aware that their similarity to humans is to benefit the majority. All they know is that they want a human lifespan. Their attempt to augment their health is mirrored in DP's use of prosthetics, psychotropic medication, hearing aids, glasses, etc. These assistive devices or modifications simulate the able-bodied, giving the person the physical and mental ability that is required to survive and independently function as normal on Earth. Society creates and perpetuates the idea that ability is at the top of the hierarchy, provoking everyone outside of that exclusive able-bodied community to want more. You must belong to the able world if you want to be successful.
Wait Until Dark exemplifies the validity of this push for exceptionalism in a more realistic environment. Right in Greenwich Village, viewers watch as recently blind Susie Hendricks learns to interact with her world now tinted dark brown. While it is beneficial for Susie to adjust and to learn to navigate with her disability, Sam pressures his wife beyond the necessary level of capability and reinforces society's standards on her. Frustrated by his demands and lack of understanding, she cries,
"Do I have to be the world's champion blind lady?"
Yes.
In one scene, audiences may notice that after Mike's departure, Susie rummages through a pile of papers to find her Braille slate so she can take down his phone number. Quite likely, it is hidden on Sam's insistence to make his wife appear as able-bodied as possible. If she can't use her assistive devices, regardless of how inconvenient for her, maybe she'll adjust to not using them. Sam feels an incredibly strong need to mask any part of her that indicates disability, even within their own home. Ultimately, his refusal to make their environment accessible for her puts her in significant danger later in the film.
Where Blade Runner serves to critique the imbalance of social power between able-bodied and disabled people, Wait Until Dark almost reinforces the divide. The film treats her lack of utilizing assistive devices in a positive light. While Sam's unwillingness to accommodate for Susie's disabilities is what puts her in so much danger in the first place, it is Susie's ability to maneuver as a sighted person that saves her life at the climax of the film. By being able to utilize the memorized layout of the apartment, she's able to outsmart Rote and ultimately survives. The act of passing is her savior, and though surviving is the original motivation for passing, there's a possibility this situation wouldn't even have happened had Sam not been so concerned about her ability to appear and function as a sighted person and had let her come with him to the studio.
While we have been discussing passing in the context of disabled people being perceived as able-bodied individuals, there are a multitude of ways that this concept can manifest, as demonstrated in the 2014 film The Way He Looks. The idea of passing actually has racial and ethnic origins, which is important to make note of. As far back as the 1800s, there is documented evidence of mixed-race people passing as white in order to protect themselves from violence and discrimination. That idea has since permeated into other minority groups, and the term has come to be acknowledged as the ability of a person to be regarded as a member of an identity group or category different from their own, typically in reference to a group with more privileged standing.
The Way He Looks explores the intricate intersectionalities of having various marginalized identities, specifically disability and homosexuality. High school student Leo, who is both blind and gay, struggles to find balance and independence in his life as a result of restrictions imposed upon him by his family and peers. In two parallel scenes, Leo is utilizing new student Gabriel as his sighted guide when the pair gets harassed for appearing gay by a group of bullies. In the first interaction, Leo responds by first flipping the group off and then pulling out his white cane as a clear indicator to the public that this is a professional physical interaction and not a romantic gesture. Interestingly, he is utilizing his disability in order to pass as straight. In the ending scene, the opposite happens. In response to taunting, Leo switches from Gabriel's holding arm, the universal positioning for a sighted guide, to holding his hand, outwardly presenting queer body language in a bold statement of pride and confidence. It is an interesting juxtaposition of choice and perception of safety, as Leo chose which side of himself to present in order to feel most secure. Unfortunately, not every situation ends as happily as Leo and Gabriel's.
Todd Haynes' film Poison demonstrates some of the detrimental effects passing can have on gender and sexual minorities, GSM. Throughout his life, John Broome has always been a person who feels displaced. Broome states that his submission to a life of prison helps him reject the world that had rejected him. Despite this claim, it becomes readily apparent that John has plenty to suppress about himself before embracing prison life. In his entry interview at Fontenelle Prison, the warden inquires if Broome had engaged in the practice of... to which he replies with a terse, "Yeah, whatever." Moving forward, it is necessary for Broome to pass as straight to avoid violence. An environment where the word homosexual can't be uttered or spelled is certainly not accepting.
The one place Broome ever felt at all at home was Baton, where he was able to act freely as himself, a gay man. Moving forward, Broome continually searches for a similar community and seeks to regain what he possessed there, a relationship with men. Finally, he thinks he's found his man in Jack Bolton, a former inmate from Baton. However, just as Broome fixes his thoughts on Bolton, he's jolted back to reality as Ross and his gang start to sexually harass one of the gay inmates. The scene's juxtaposition serves as the strong reminder that prison is not a safe place to be out. Yet this does not diminish Broome's yearning for Bolton. Suppression can't cure desire. Rather, it taints it. Here, we see what happens when passing goes from a survival mechanism to a dangerous subversion of internalized animosity.
Part of Broome's attraction to Bolton is in their past. At Baton, Broome picked on Bolton for being sullen and small. If a relationship forms, Broome could assume the dominant role, expressing his sexuality but still passing as straight by fulfilling a stereotypically masculine role. Broome finally gets a chance to break his facade one night. Though he's initially incredibly on edge, he grows more bold when he feels he has control over Bolton. Power, a classically masculine trait, excites Broome. The high of obtaining and wielding control, combined with the immense pressure to conceal his homosexuality and present as straight, is what leads Broome to rape Bolton.
Rape allows John to satisfy a once justified but now toxic urge in the ultimate display of masculine power: penetration. In the scene's background, audiences can hear the other men harassing someone, helping the viewer realize that John has now completed the cycle. Once out of place by forcing Jack into submission, he can finally embrace a prison lifestyle, leaving Bolton rejected. Bolton feels the full effect of Broom's aggression, and in trying to escape the dangerous situation Broom has left him in, is shot and killed.
In addition to creating toxic and sometimes deadly situations, a compulsory need to pass carries an associated level of worth to being able to present oneself as the dominant social, sexual, or ethnic group. When this distinction becomes exaggerated, passing can become the ultimate indicator between absolute or no worth. In cinema, this translation of value often manifests into the killer-cure trope. When a character cannot be fixed or returned to normal or privileged status, they die.
In All About My Mother, Pedro Almodovar displays the quintessential example of killer-cure. Lola, the father to both Manuela and Rosa's son, has AIDS and manages to transmit the virus to Rosa, who then passes it on to her son. Though her child manages to fight the disease and go on to be the miracle baby at an AIDS conference, Rosa dies during childbirth. To be cured means a blessed life. Anything else leads to death. At her funeral, the audience is introduced to Lola, who, in her second line, informs Morella she is dying. Until now, Lola's character has primarily existed as someone to blame problems on. She is rarely spoken of fondly, and as soon as her character is formally introduced, she is characterized by her dying. Lola exemplifies the impossibilities of a cure. She cannot cure her age, just as she cannot cure her addiction or her destructive behavior. In tandem, she is not particularly apt at passing. After impregnating 2 women, it is very clear that Lola is not a cis woman. In comparison to Agrado, Lola is portrayed by a male actor, and the visual differences are evident. It seems Lola's inability to convincingly pass as woman is tied to her unfavorable traits and ultimately her death.
Though Agrado's story begins in a very rough place, we see her character thrive from there on, going on to star in professional theater. And as Agrado informs everyone, she is muy auténtica. She has spent her whole life trying to please everyone, to make people's lives pleasant. She finds that the best way to be agreeable is to be authentic, and according to La Agrado, you are more authentic the more you resemble what you've dreamed of being. However, Agrado's dreams are not exclusively hers. For her, being authentic means being a woman, but in order to please society, if she is going to be perceived like a woman, she needs to look like the ideal woman. That means new eyes, new tits, no body hair, and refined lips, cheeks, hips, and ass. From the beginning of the movie, the viewer can see that Agrado can handle herself just fine. She does not need to pass to survive. Societal standards demand that she pass in order to be happy.
Transporting back to a time before the human body could be tailored, Einar Wegener, a successful landscape artist and married man, realizes that he is truly a woman in Tom Hooper's The Danish Girl. Einar begins to explore his identity as Lily Elbe, frequently going out, making friends, getting jobs, and starting relationships while dressed as Lily. But the more she is required to pass as a woman, the more she becomes certain that she will not truly be Lily until she can be cured of the sickness that is her disguise. Lily wants nothing more than to be a fully realized woman, and she is willing to make sacrifices. When given the opportunity to undergo gender reassignment surgery, Lily is aware that her chances of death are high, but still elects for the surgery as it is her only hope. Ultimately, Lily becomes the first person to undergo gender reassignment surgery, but due to complications from the second operation, she grows incredibly weak and passes away. However, moments before her death, Lily assures her company that she is entirely herself. She tells her wife of a dream she had the night before, where her mother looked down at her as a baby and called her Lily. These become her dying words. For Lily, the price of death was not too much to pay for her cure. Compared to La Agrado, Lily's motivation to feel validation as a woman feels a bit more personal. Despite fervent protests from those around her, she persists in pursuing herself because it is important to her. This representation is a little more uplifting in its message. Be who you are despite what others think, rather than being who you are so long as it aligns to what others think.
However, The Danish Girl falters in one key way. Eddie Redmayne is not trans. For a character that is so passionately authentic, it seems strange that her actor is required to pass as something they are inherently not for the majority of the film. The Danish Girl is a beautiful and powerful movie, but it could be even more so with a more accurate representation and authentic trans visibility. Unfortunately, Redmayne's portrayal of Lily is not a unique case. With one exception, none of the films discussed feature queer or disabled actors. Barring Todd Haynes' Poison, the films exclusively cast cisgender, heterosexual, and non-disabled individuals to play these minority roles. Though these films attempt to tell the beautiful and complex stories from a variety of communities, by refusing to include disabled and queer bodies, the films perpetuate the idea that one must be a part of the majority in order to succeed. It sends the message that disabled and GSM individuals are not capable of telling their own stories, that able-bodied or straight actors can do a better job. There is a strange sort of irony when able-bodied actors must pass as disabled to create awareness about ableism. They certainly don't need to pass as disabled to survive, and yet every day underrepresented groups need to pass as human. They need to pass as worthy of attention in order to survive. Because the perceived top tier isn't thriving because they are naturally inclined to do so. They thrive because attention is on them, as it always has been.